Was $300,000 a month not enough for you? My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, stood at the door of the private hospital room. Her face was as hard as stone, and her eyes had that gleam which appears when she's about to finalize a major business deal. I was holding my 2-day-old daughter, Layla, against my chest. I was wearing the same old gray sweatshirt that had been on my body for the last 48 hours. Between the antiseptic smell from the hallway and the soft scent of the baby, I thought I'd misheard my grandmother. Layla was sleeping on my shoulder, her tiny fist gripping my shirt tightly. On the side table, the hospital bill lay face down, because every time my eyes fell on it, my breath would catch. I had placed an old magazine over the bill to hide it from my grandmother, as if a lack of money could be concealed under pages. Grandmother didn't look at my baby's bassinet. She looked at my disheveled hair, my exhausted face, and the cheap overnight bag sitting on the chair. Then she asked again, "I've transferred $300,000 into your account on the first business day of every month since your wedding day. I thought you had chosen simple living. I didn't know things would come to this state." I kept staring at her. My throat was completely dry. I had barely slept an hour in the last 2 days. In a trembling voice, I said, "Grandmother, what are you talking about? I never received a single dollar." In that moment, the air in the room shifted. Grandmother didn't scream or shout. She simply took out her phone and called someone. "Diane," she said, "I need you at St. Vincent's Hospital immediately. Bring all the last 30 months of financial data. $300,000 a month for 30 months. That's roughly $9 million. And me? For the last 4 months, I had been clipping cheap grocery store coupons. I had worked overnight, inventory audits, at a regional pharmacy chain well into my 3rd trimester, because my husband, Ethan, had said, cash flow is very tight. I had met Ethan Mercer at a fundraising dinner in Greenwich. He seemed like a polished, composed man. He worked in private wealth management, which meant expensive suits, and the kind of language that made money sound like a season, market cycles, exposure, liquidity. When he spoke, even fear seemed temporary. Grandmother approved of him, and for me, Eleanor Whitmore's approval meant a bank guarantee. Grandmother had built the Whitmore Industrial Group from the ground up, and she was one of those people who believe in quiet wealth. The first thing Ethan did after the wedding was set up a joint household account. "Everything will be easier now, Naomi," he had said. "Mortgage, insurance, baby savings. Everything will be handled from one dashboard." I thought he was taking responsibility. I trusted him blindly. Slowly, he took control into his own hands. OTPs went to his phone because he set up autopay. He changed the passwords. When I would ask, "How much is left in the account?" he would kiss my forehead and say, "Naomi, don't you worry. Just focus on the baby. Think like a married woman now. The movement of money is different. Last year, when I was 6 months pregnant and my card declined at the baby store, he said, 'Probably a fraud flag. I'll fix it.' When I started buying cheaper vitamins and store-brand equivalents, he praised me. That's what I love about you. You don't fall apart during tough times." Today I understood. While I was counting blood bags and prenatal vitamins in agony at 2 a.m. at the pharmacy, he was building his social appearance on my very own money. Ethan and his mother, Vivian Mercer, entered the room. They were carrying flowers. Vivian was in her usual cream-colored cashmere coat and expensive pearls. When she saw Grandmother, her smile froze. Grandmother looked at Ethan and said, "Where is my granddaughter's money, Ethan?" Ethan placed the flowers on the windowsill and said very calmly, I'm sorry. I don't understand which funds you're referring to. Grandmother cut him off. Don't waste your time lying to me. Her voice was so cold that the room's temperature seemed to drop. I sent $300,000 every single month. Naomi is declining hospital upgrades and doing overnight audit work while you stand here holding flowers. Where is it? Ethan looked at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, only calculation. Naomi, this is a bit complicated. I made investments for the family. Due to timing and reinvestment decisions, the cash is tied up. I looked at him. The same polished face, the same old manner. I simply said, Ethan, I stood on swollen feet all night because I thought we didn't have money for diapers. And you're telling me this is complicated? Vivian stepped forward. Naomi, sweetheart, you're just emotional right now because of the hormones. Financial complexity is beyond your understanding. Grandmother turned to her and said, Vivian, if your name comes up in this theft, remaining silent will be in your best interest. Grandmother took me with her, not to Ethan's expensive staged mansion, but to her old house in Greenwich, where the walls smelled of old cedar and tea. Once there, I began to remember the last 2 years of my life, as if it were a crime scene. The next morning, Diane Rourke, the lawyer, arrived. She placed a thick file on the table. Look at this, Naomi, she said, turning the first page. Every month on the 2nd, the money sent by Grandmother had been transferred by Ethan into his personal brokerage account. And from there, the money was going into a shell company, Mercer Strategic Advisory. The sole controller of this company was Ethan. That wasn't all. Vivian Mercer had a premium credit card whose bill was paid out of the money, sent by my grandmother. Spa visits, expensive hotels, jewelry, all of it was purchased with my grandmother's money, the money meant for my and Layla's security. But the biggest betrayal was yet to come. Diane played an audio recording. It was from the cloud backup of the smart speaker in Ethan's house. Ethan was telling his mother, just keep Naomi tired. Don't let her panic. Just keep her exhausted enough so she can't ask questions. As long as she stays tired, we'll extract all the capital. My blood turned cold as ice. They had budgeted my exhaustion. They had used my trust as a renewable asset. Tears no longer fell from Naomi's eyes. Instead, a cold fire burned there. The files Diane Rourke had placed on the large dining table of Eleanor Whitmore's mansion were not just paper. They were Ethan and Vivian's death warrant. Naomi, Diane said calmly, her voice carrying the experience of an old hunter. Ethan hasn't just stolen money. Last month, he signed an $11 million private capital deal. A group of investors are putting their money based on their trust in Ethan's integrity. They don't know that they are giving their money to a man who budgets his wife's exhaustion. I gently placed Layla in her bassinet. My hands were no longer trembling. I don't just want my money back, Diane. I want everything they took from me back. My peace, my trust, and every night I spent standing on the cold pharmacy floor. Grandmother took a sip of her tea and said, The Whitmore family never starts a fight, Naomi. But when we finish, we don't leave a trace. Diane, start the process. The next morning, at 8 a.m., just as Ethan was preparing to celebrate his new deal in his expensive office, the first bomb exploded. Diane filed a lawsuit for civil fraud and financial abuse. But that was just the beginning. On Grandmother's orders, I had all of Ethan and Vivian's joint accounts and credit cards put under an emergency freeze. By noon, Ethan's phone was flooded with calls. Naomi, what is this insanity? Why aren't my cards working? Do you know how big a meeting I have today? You're destroying my career because of a hormonal breakdown." Ethan's voice carried the same old manipulation, but it no longer worked on me. I picked up the phone only once and said, "Ethan, cash moves differently now. Remember? Now my grandmother's team is monitoring your accounts. Good luck with the meeting." But the real game was with Vivian Mercer. That evening, Vivian was set to attend Connecticut's biggest charity gala. She wore a new diamond necklace, the same one purchased with money that should have paid my hospital bill. As soon as Vivian arrived at the gala entrance, 2 men in suits were standing there. They weren't police. They were forensic auditors sent by Diane. In front of everyone, they handed Vivian a legal notice. "Mrs. Mercer," one auditor said loudly enough for all the high society women to hear, "this necklace and your coat were purchased with stolen funds. We have orders to recover these assets as evidence." Vivian's face turned white with shame. The woman who mocked others for their simplicity was now being proven a thief in front of thousands of people. Back at Ethan's office, his $11 million investors put the deal on hold. Why? Because Diane had sent them a factual notice proving that Ethan Mercer was planning to funnel his client's money into the same shell company he created to steal from me. On the third day, Ethan panicked. He made one final mistake. He spread a rumor among the city's elite that I was suffering from postpartum psychosis and that my grandmother was manipulating me. He thought this personal attack would weaken me. But he didn't know that one of grandmother's friends was sitting in that very boardroom while he was telling those lies. Diane added a defamation case to the file before lunch. That evening, Ethan showed up outside grandmother's house. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. "Naomi, come out. We can talk. I'll fix everything. For Layla's sake, please." I looked down from the window. I no longer felt hatred or love for him, only a deep emptiness. Grandmother opened the door and said just one sentence. "Ethan, your opinion no longer holds any legal value. My lawyers will see you in court on Monday." As he drove away, I looked at Diane. "What next?" Diane smiled and pulled out one final file. "Now comes the secret that Ethan himself has hidden from Vivian. Ethan didn't just steal your money, Naomi. He also embezzled from the Sterling Family Trust, and his punishment isn't just paying back money. It's prison bars." Ethan's crumbling world was now standing on a pile of gunpowder, and Naomi held the final spark. Monday morning, the area outside the courthouse was crowded with media. Ethan Mercer, once the brightest star of Greenwich, was now walking with his head bowed, trying to hide behind his lawyers. Vivian Mercer had covered her face with a large scarf, but her elegance could no longer hide the wrinkles on her face. Inside the courtroom, Diane Rourke turned the page that Ethan never thought anyone would find. "Your Honor," Diane began calmly, "Ethan Mercer didn't just break his wife's trust. He created a master-slave account strategy through which he funneled other clients' money under the name Mercer Strategic Advisory. We have discovered that he transferred $4 million from the Sterling Family Trust, distant relatives of Vivian Mercer, to cover his personal losses." Vivian's mouth hung open. She snapped her head toward Ethan. "Ethan! What is she saying? That money was my retirement fund." Sweat began to glisten on Ethan's face. He hadn't just betrayed Naomi. He had betrayed his own mother. He had made Vivian believe that expensive gifts were coming to her as favors, when in reality, it was Vivian's future money that Ethan had gambled away in the market. From the bench, I, Naomi, watched them both. Vivian, who once told me that Ethan isn't shallow, had now become a victim of her own son's greed. "Naomi," Ethan tried once more, his voice now choked with tears. "Please, stop this. I'll return everything. We'll start over. Layla needs her father. I held my grandmother's hand, looked into Ethan's eyes, and said, Layla needs a father who can teach her the difference between assets and liability, not a father who looted her mother's sleep and peace. You sold our daughter's future the day you budgeted my exhaustion. On Judgment Day, the court found Ethan Mercer guilty of financial fraud, grand larceny, and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Vivian Mercer was also found guilty as an accessory to fraud, and she was forced to sell all her assets, jewelry, and that expensive mansion to repay the debt to the Whitmore Trust. 3 months later, I was sitting in the garden of grandmother's old house. Layla was in my lap, and the soft rays of sunlight were falling on her face. My $9 million had been returned, but to me, their value was now just a number. The real wealth was in my lap, the peace I hadn't known in the last 3 years. Diane Rourke came to me and handed over a file. Ethan has sent a letter from prison. He's asking for forgiveness. I didn't even look at the letter. Throw it in the trash, Diane. There's no room for complexities in my life anymore. Grandmother took Layla into her arms and said with a smile, Naomi, you were right. Cash moves differently now. This money is no longer yours. It will go toward Layla's education and toward helping women who are victims of financial abuse. I looked out the window. Ethan's palace-like house now belonged to someone else. Vivian now lived in a small apartment in the city, where perhaps she now makes her own tea. I had learned that no matter how polished a betrayal may be, a single faint whisper of truth shatters it like glass. I packed my old gray sweatshirt into a box to remind myself of where I came from. But now, my destination is far more beautiful.